as the golden light of destruction disappeared from the earth. Zhang Yi exhaled a long breath, relieved that his dimensional door was able to block Yuan Kya's attack. After all, this kind of large-scale attack could not concentrate all the power in one place like his divine power. And due to this reason, the annihilation power of Nirvana was difficult to pose any threat to his dimensional door. However, among the group of survivors, Wei Dinghai was the most unfortunate. Using his frost armor to the maximum, his heavy armor covered him like a Gundam. But when the golden light of annihilation swept across the earth, his armor was shattered like a confetti. Wei Dinghai subconsciously stretched out his right arm in front of him. But to everyone's horror, his arm was directly destroyed as if it was fake. It turns out that he was able to save his life by hiding within the range of Zhang Yi's dimensional door at the last moment. Unfortunately, his whole body didn't make it. Wei Dinghai used ice to seal the wound on his arm, but fortunately he was not a melee-type mutant, and he could still fight even if he lost an arm. With just this one blow from Yuan Kya, she managed to kill almost all the mutants who were not many on the field. Only the leaders of a few forces and the few people from the investigation team were still alive. But everyone had no time to grieve because right now, whether they could survive or not was a huge challenge. The mood of despair began to spread in everyone's heart. They had tried their best, but they did not cause any harm to Yuan Kya, and they suffered heavy casualties. How can we fight next? Are we going to just wait to die? Are mutants of Epsilon level really invincible? These thoughts raced in everyone's mind as they stared at Yuan Kya from below. Yuan Kya exuded a sacred and soft light, looking down at Zhang Yi and the others. Zhang Yi, you are very capable. However, I have absorbed the abilities of 36 people, including the ability of Bian Junwu. How are you going to deal with it? She stared at Zhang Yi. A smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. Then, stretching out her index finger, she pointed at Zhang Yi with a crazy look in her eyes. I also want your ability too. Zhang Yi silently stared at Yuan Kya, his eyes full of fear and caution. He said to everyone in a deep voice, "Now, we have to give everything and fight hard. Take out whatever trump card you have and fight with everything you have. Otherwise, we might all die here." Wu Di gritted his teeth and roared from behind. "We know it without you telling us." He said nothing else, but inwardly, he was in a dilemma. That is, even if they fight hard like Zhang Yi just said, can they really win? As a member of the investigation team, Wu Di didn't want to say such discouraging words, but he clearly thought of this over and over again. With a gloomy expression, Zhang Yi continued, "There is still a glimmer of hope if we fight with all our might. Otherwise, we will be doomed to fail and die." But at this moment, the group's brief moment of respite was over as a new round of attack was upon them again. Yuan Kya did not have the patience to wait until Zhang Yi and the others finished chatting. This time, the attack unexpectedly came from underground. The ground under their feet exploded, and hundreds of thorny vines with white frost stabbed at everyone from the soles of their feet. This is the ability of Dai Mei, who was once a priest of the snow worship sect. Originally, she was just an ordinary special ability user who could breed thorny vines from her body as a means of fighting. There was nothing remarkable when she died. In the zombie war just now, she was gnawed to the bone and there was no bone residue left. But her ability, in the hands of Yuan Kya, had become extremely powerful. This attack caught everyone off guard, and Zhang Yi decisively opened his space shuttle and left the original place. On the other hand, the others hurriedly used all means, even if they fell into the icy rocks. They tried their best to block the attacks from the thorns that were harder and sharper than steel. Perhaps it was Zhang Yi's words that inspired their fighting spirit, or it was the idea that the army of the underdog must win, and they lived to the death. These top-level mutants who were in the limelight finally started to fight for their lives. Wu Di gritted his teeth, and suddenly a surging spiritual power surged out of his body, rushing his hair high into the sky. In an instant, his blonde hair became whiter than snow, and the surging spiritual power wrapped around his body and made him fly high into the sky. Seeing this scene, Bailey Chongqing, Qi Guangming, and the rest of the investigation team who were hiding and watching the battle behind the building in the distance all showed expressions of reluctance. Wu Di's floating gun consumes spiritual power. But once this power is used excessively, it will consume his life. At this time, Wu Di had already disregarded the consequences and began to burn his mental power like crazy. However, this approach allowed him to briefly reach the threshold of Epsilon. Wu Di's change attracted Yuan Kya's attention. She frowned, not expecting this new trouble to arise. In the air, Wu Di laughed wildly like a madman. He knew what this approach meant to him, but now he had no other choice. Actually, to be precise, he didn't give a shit. After all, Bian Junwu could sacrifice for the team, so why couldn't he do the same? Die, you damn rotten bitch. Die, die. Die! Wu Di lost it at this moment as countless balls of light were hurled at Yuan Kya in quick succession. This time around, the power of the attack was completely different from the previous ones, at least it was improved by several levels. However, they still couldn't penetrate Yuan Kya's telekinetic barrier. Realizing this, Wu Di changed his form of attack. He raised his hand high, and actually condensed a huge spiritual light ball with a radius of several meters, and then swung it towards Yuan Kya fiercely. The huge floating cannon was extremely fast, and it contained an extremely terrifying destructive power. The others below were not idle either, and they cooperated with Wu Di to attack Yuan Kya from all directions, especially Zhang Yi, who actually went around behind Yuan Kya and started to attack after he had a lock on her with his divine power. Zhang Yi and Wu Di used their strongest attack from two different directions. Yuan Kya's frown deepens, not daring to be negligent. She suddenly felt the threat of death and used her destructive power to counter. The terrifying light of destruction once again swept in all directions with her as the center, and then silently began to annihilate everything around her. The collision of these terrifying powers intertwined, causing a huge deafening explosion around Yuan Kya. Outside afar at a safe distance from the battlefield, the other members of the investigation team watching the scene couldn't stand it anymore. Although their abilities were not suitable for fighting Yuan Kya, they couldn't bear to see their teammates die tragically with their own eyes. Also, at some unspecified location, Liang Yu, Uncle Yu and the others saw the colorful luster in the sky and wondered if it was finally over. Although they fully trusted Zhang Yi, they also knew that he was most afraid of death, and he would do whatever it takes to survive, so dispatching them to safety with such confidence meant that he must have a way. He definitely has to, because Zhang Yi was never the hero type, and had never cared about being shameless in order to survive. After that intense round, Yuan Kya's face finally showed a trace of fatigue. She can have countless superpowers, but the superpowers in her body can be exhausted. Facing the joint attack of two top mutants at the same time, even she couldn't be calm. However, after that attack, Wu Di's state took a sharp turn for the worse. His face became vicissitudes at a speed visible to the naked eye, and his eyes were a little dim. The next moment, he fell headfirst like a crashed plane. This attack exhausted everything he had. Bailey Chongqing rushed over and caught him. On the other hand, Zhang Yi quickly stuffed numerous supernatural food into his mouth while fighting. He was not afraid of a war of attrition. Even if he continuously displays his divine power, his superpowers can be quickly replenished. Zhang Yi and Wu Di's combined strongest attack finally made Yuan Kya look a little tired. However, the current situation was not optimistic, because except Zhang Yi, everyone else has suffered injuries of varying severity. Wu Di was completely useless and can no longer fight. A large pool of blood gushed out from the corner of Xiao Honglian's mouth. Even with the battle armor condensed by the purgatory furnace, she could not withstand the aftermath of the power of annihilation. As for Wei Dinghai, one of his arms was broken and the whole person was almost useless. Only Zhang Yi and Bailey Chongqing were still standing in the field. But how could the two of them defeat the nearly invincible Yuan Kya? Despair. Complete despair. The strength of high-level mutants were such a complete crushing to lower-level mutants. Just a few days ago, if it weren't for Bianjun's death, Bailey Chongqing would even want to win Yuan Kya over and become a member of the Jiangnan region. But he couldn't do that now, because that would be a betrayal to Bianjun, a brother in life and death. Also, it's obvious at this point that Yuan Kya has serious mental issues. Why do you have to struggle so hard? That will only increase your pain. It's better to let me kill you quietly, so that you can all be free. Yuan Kya's voice came like a god. She saw that the people in front of her were no longer a threat to her. Even though Zhang Yi was a bit weird, his only threatening means could not break Yuan Kya's own. At this moment, Yuan Kya enjoyed this powerful feeling very much. This feeling of being able to dominate everything and destroy everything was really great. But at this moment, Zhang Yi suddenly spoke up, and his next words made everyone stare at him with a surprised look. Zhang Yi sighed softly and said to Bailey Chongqing and the others with a cold look, "Well, it seems that your limit has been reached. Although what you have done is a little less than I expected, it is almost enough." Zhang Yi's tone was a little loud, which made the people around him feel stunned after hearing it. Yes, they admitted that Zhang Yi's divine power had a great restraining effect on Yuan Kya. But in their impression, Zhang Yi's strength lies in defense, not attack. If it was a one-on-one today, he might be killed by Yuan Kya within 5 seconds. So they didn't understand why Zhang Yi suddenly changed his attitude. Zhang Yi waved to the others, but his eyes were always fixed on Yuan Kya, not leaving for a moment. "You guys should leave here. The next battlefield will be taken over by me." Things have developed to this point, and everything has developed as Zhang Yi thought at the beginning. The significance for bringing all these mutants along was to help him consume Yuan Kya's power as much as possible. Perhaps it can be said that from the very beginning, Zhang Yi did not expect to rely on them to defeat Yuan Kya. Bailey Chongqing looked at Zhang Yi in astonishment. Zhang Yi, you are not kidding, right? Zhang Yi replied calmly. Of course not. No one would seek death at this time. They also don't think Zhang Yi would be the kind of great man who would sacrifice himself to fight for others to survive. But since Zhang Yi said so, they can only choose to believe it now. Then we will leave it to you. Xiao Honglian and Waiting Hai did not hesitate, and decisively dragged their injured bodies away. Xing Tian glanced at Zhang Yi and said calmly, "Old friend, our last hope is placed on you." He gathered all his remaining energy, and then blessed them all on Zhang Yi. This made Zhang Yi feel that his body was stronger and faster, and even his 5 senses became extremely sharp. Bailey Chongqing sent Qi Guangming and Wu Di, who was completely exhausted, away, while he remained on the battlefield. His injuries were not light, but he was still capable. Zhang Yi saw this scene and did not stop it. On the other hand, Yuan Kya did not stop them from leaving. In her eyes, they were all insignificant insects she could crush at any time she wanted. Also, no one in the entire Tianhai city could escape from her anyway. She was just very curious about Zhang Yi's sudden attitude, and didn't know what this man wanted to do, so she simply observed. After all, her biggest threat was him, and once she was done with Zhang Yi, she could handle the rest with ease. With his dimensional door open between himself and Yuan Kya, Zhang Yi took no chances and wasn't complacent. However, he thought that since Bailey Chongqing was willing, he would let him fight alongside with him. But he did not expect him to play a big role. Bailey Chongqing suddenly threw a black pistol over. Zhang Yi recognized it at a glance. It was the sidearm of their captain Bian Junwu. Zhang Yi frowned slightly. "A gun?" Bailey Chongqing said seriously. "There are about 20 origin bullets in it." The name of the origin bullet made Zhang Yi a little tempted. It is a bullet specially used to deal with mutants, and it can even pose a certain threat to Yuan Kya. "Okay, I'll take it." Zhang Yi raised his head and looked at Yuan Kya, squinting slightly. Everything should have an end, right? Yuan Kya's mouth curled up slightly. She was suspended in the air, and the sacred light was shrouded around her. "Who gave you the confidence?" "Zhang Yi, you know nothing about power. I haven't used my full strength yet." Yuan Kya opened her arms, and the majestic supernatural power formed a violent storm around her. And this time around, lightning was added to the mix. "Now, I'm slowly getting used to having so many abilities in my body. Don't worry. I'll kill you soon and take away your power too." With Yuan Kya in the center, more terrifying storm emerged. And the ground beneath Zhang Yi and Bailey Chongqing's feet was even more broken, with countless broken stones floating in the air. Bailey Chongqing used his flexible speed to jump away, stepping on one boulder after another in the air, trying to attack Yuan Kya. Yuan Kya's eyes were full of fierceness, and she pointed his 5 fingers of her left hand at him, and a huge telekinesis swept him away directly. Even the most powerful enhancement ability users cannot use their own power in the air. Zhang Yi ignored Bailey Chongqing. When the vibration under his feet began, his figure flashed in the air and appeared on a rooftop opposite Yuan Kya. The vector direction of the alternate space is not affected by the outside world. Therefore, as long as Zhang Yi controls the direction of the dimensional door, he can achieve any teleportation within a range of 300 meters, or even stagnate in the air. Yuan Kya waved her right hand, and a violent tornado several thousand meters long hung upside down, like a sword of Damocles, stabbing Zhang Yi fiercely. But Zhang Yi didn't even dodge. He stood on the ruins of a building and opened his right hand. The violent tornado completely sank into Zhang Yi's dimensional door. The next moment, a second door suddenly opened on the right side of Yuan Kya, and the tornado she released turned around and began to attack her. Yuan Kya gave a look, and the huge tornado shattered. "Dimensional door, huh? Then can you handle this move?" Yuan Kya asked coldly. The next moment, with Zhang Yi as the center, hundreds of hurricane-shaped spheres suddenly appeared in countless directions. They rushed towards his position in an instant. With a loud boom, the hurricane swept through the space wildly, and the rooftop had been smashed to pieces. But Zhang Yi appeared from another place the next moment. He was safe and sound, and even his expression was the same as before, a look in his eyes of utter indifference. Bailey Chongqing, Xiao Honglian, and the others in the distance were all surprised to see this scene. Xiao Honglian was stunned and couldn't help whispering, "Turns out that, in the past, he has never used his true strength in front of us." Perhaps only Liang Yu and a few others knew how terrifying Zhang Yi's ability to save his life was. His dimensional gate was already perverted enough, and now he has the ability to travel through space, which is enough to make him immune to almost all physical attacks. Yuan Kya saw that Zhang Yi was safe and sound, and a hint of surprise flashed in her eyes. But soon she sneered disdainfully. You can only run away. Although Yuan Kya hated Zhang Yi's ability, she was not afraid. In the past, the Jiangnan region completed the collection of intelligence on the abilities of the mutants in the entire Tianhai city. Regarding Zhang Yi's ability, they had analyzed it a long time ago. The conclusion was that the defense was full, but the offensiveness was insufficient. Even now that Zhang Yi has the ability of his divine power, this skill of his consumes too much energy and has a significant pre-swing. Unless it is a sneak attack, it is impossible to kill Yuan Kya in a head-on battle. Yuan Kya believes that she is invincible. Of course, Zhang Yi also thinks so. The sharpest spear versus the strongest shield. Which one will win? The people watching the battle from a distance were extremely nervous, but they could only pray for Zhang Yi. Come and kill me if you have the ability. Zhang Yi sneered and made a provocative gesture to Yuan Kya. In return, it is naturally a more fierce attack. Zhang Yi's figure kept flashing in the air. With the ability to shuttle through space, his ability to save his life was really first class. Yuan Kya could not lock him to attack, and ordinary physical attacks would be absorbed by the dimensional gate. Therefore, she could only expand her attack range so that Zhang Yi could not escape from her attack area. But what she didn't expect was that Zhang Yi actually showed a new ability at this time. Although the dimensional gate has a huge area and strong defensive ability, its weakness is that the defense range is one way and cannot be moved. After obtaining this ability, Zhang Yi has been constantly improving it. Finally, he has opened a more flexible defensive skill-dimensional shield. He can compress the two-dimensional gates to the size of a shield and then control it with both hands. Although the area is reduced, it is more flexible and convenient to defend against attacks from all over the body. Moreover, he does not need to free his hands to launch an attack. In the battle with Yuan Kya, his only effective means of attack is the pupil technique, Divine Power. This battle was fought to the border of the Snow Worship sect, and the avenue had almost been wiped out. With the defense ability with almost no dead angles, no matter how terrible the attack of Yuan Kya was, it will be absorbed by Zhang Yi with a dimensional shield and then bounced back. Zhang Yi is not always in a passive state of being beaten. Once he finds Yuan Kya's gap, he will use his divine power to attack. Yuan Kya has always been afraid of Zhang Yi's divine power, and the attack cannot be too wanton. Whenever Zhang Yi uses his divine power, she must also use Nirvana to counterattack. With the ruins of the Snow Worship sect as the center, the area of 10 kilometers became the battlefield for the two. Spherical illusory light balls appeared in the air, and everything within the range would be devoured. Logically speaking, Zhang Yi's current combat power is far inferior to Yuan Kya, and he can't sustain such a long battle. However, on the one hand, he has the blessing power of the Xingtian Legion, and on the other hand, he has stored a large amount of supernatural food in his alternate space. While fighting, he will eat to restore his physical strength and supernatural power. If not, he will be completely exhausted after using at most 5 rounds of his divine power. And because of this, he felt the horror of Yuan Kya. After fighting for so long, her supernatural power is still as terrifying as the ocean. Zhang Yi has a profound experience of the power of level 5. This is based on the fact that Yuan Kya is not proficient in combat experience. As for the others, they can only watch the battle. Even Bailey Chongqing gave up joining the battle later. In his opinion, in a battle of this level, he could only be a burden, and was not qualified to join in. Because of this, everyone's attitude towards Zhang Yi changed from being unfavorable at the beginning to being shocked now. This defense is too terrifying. Fortunately, we didn't keep fighting with Zhang Yi, otherwise, we would have been the ones to be destroyed in the end. Xiao Honglian and Wei Dinghai had the same idea in mind. But even if they continue to fight like this, it's not a big deal. Meng Xiu looked solemn. The difference in the amount of superpowers in the bodies of mutants of different levels is also extremely huge. Especially after reaching level 5, it can't be understood from the perspective of ordinary mutants. Zhang Yi's attack has no effect on her. Even if it can delay her time, he can't win. Once Yuan Kya gets tired, he can just leave him and attack us first. Everyone's heart sank. What Meng Xiu said does make sense. Zhang Yi's defense is just strong, so Yuan Kya can't kill him for a while. But if Yuan Kya wants to leave, Zhang Yi can't keep him. With telekinesis, her flying speed is not much different from teleportation. She can completely abandon Zhang Yi and kill the others first. Except trusting Zhang Yi, we have no other choice. Bailey Chongqing said in a deep voice, if Yuan Kya really wants to kill us, we will never be able to escape from an Epsilon. They had even heard of the first Epsilon mutant, the mysterious strongman in Shangjing district, who can even kill people thousands of miles away. Everyone knew that Bailey Changqing was right. Under the absolute power gap, all small thoughts were in vain. Unless Zhang Yi can beat Yuan Kya, or at least consume her so much that she can't chase him, otherwise there is no point in them running. On the battlefield, Zhang Yi and Yuan Kya have been fighting for more than 10 minutes. Yuan Kya's eyes gradually showed an anxious look. She has used dozens of methods to deal with Zhang Yi. But Zhang Yi's dimensional shield and space shuttle are simply bugs. You can't hit him and you can't catch him. This made Yuan Kya, who thought she was close to a god, very angry at this point. Her attack became more terrifying. She even began to use Nirvana to attack Zhang Yi. Obviously, he also counters with his divine power. Then, another big move between the bombardments. Colorful colors appeared in the space again. A building was affected, and a spherical hole was melted directly from the waist, and then it collapsed with a loud bang.